knows, the cost of food continues to rise. This is borne out by the July Household Affordability Index compiled by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. The group says while we may start to see food prices stabilising, it's not clear when they might begin to fall. Let's discuss this further with the group's program coordinator, Mervyn Abrahams, who joins us virtually. Thank you for your time, as always, tonight, Mervyn. Always great to have you on to bring us the latest and the very important research and work that your team does, and just always bringing us back to centering us in what really is important and keeping us in touch with how South Africans are struggling to keep food on the table. Now, we hear every day food prices are going up, cost of everything is going up. Every day there's stories about the cost of living, not just here, but overseas as well. It's a problem that the globe is struggling with. But let's bring it closer to home now. The latest numbers coming out of your organization tells us that the average cost of its household food basket has been set at 4,748 Rand in July of 2022. That's just over 60 Rand up from the same time last year. Tell us more about these numbers and how you got to that total.
So good evening, Marcel, and good evening to all your viewers. Yes, as you've mentioned, our basket now stands at 4,748 Rand. And this basket consists of 44 very basic foods that households in the lower income, working class households tell us they would like to purchase at the end of each month. And so we have seen this basket increase by about 611 Rand, or 14.8% over the past year. And since about February this year, the basket has just increased and we have not seen any kind of relief. But however, we are seeing that in July, for instance, that the rate of increases on a monthly basis is beginning to get less and less. So for instance, in June, the increase was 1.7%. In July, it is 1.3%. And we have seen some global prices of particularly wheat and sunflower coming down. And so we are expecting that food prices will possibly stabilize over the next 2 to 3 months.
Now, these month-on-month increases that we've watched has been head-spinning for most of us. Have you ever seen anything like this in the time that you've been doing this kind of work?
No, so this is the first time since we've been doing this work over the last, I would say, since about 2007, 2008, sure, when we had a massive also food price inflation and massive a shortage of food globally. So this has been the biggest spike since then. And there are many factors that have been contributing to it, both global as well as local. At a global level, we have seen geopolitical tensions, massive increases in fuel price, massive increases in wheat prices. We've seen countries blocking the export of oil and wheat in order to protect their local markets. And then, of course, in South Africa, we also have local issues that are contributing. The continuing saga around Eskom, the fact that our logistics, our supply line of food is quite long in South Africa. So, for instance, we grow most of our tomatoes in Limpopo, and that we have to cart all around the country. So you can well imagine the amount of petrol that is involved in just bringing that food to our table. And all of those have contributed to these massive price increases.
Now, you mentioned there a massive 14.8% hike in terms of the cost of that household food basket year on year. Now, long before we saw these kinds of spikes, people's salaries, for instance, have not been keeping up with inflation in South Africa for quite some time now. What is your team hearing from families? What are they doing to try and keep their head above water and trying to keep at least the basics on the table? Because we've been hearing also the last few weeks that some people are giving up their jobs because the cost of just getting to and from work has not been worth their while. So those are some of the massive sacrifices being made from people by people and their families. What are you hearing?
So, Marcel, exactly what you have just been saying is also what we are hearing on the ground. So the issue around wages in South Africa is really a very difficult one because historically our wage levels in South Africa has been extremely low. So when we look, for instance, at the national minimum wage of about 3,600, and we look at the cost of this basket, then even if you spend your entire wage on this food basket, you will not be able to purchase all 44 foods. So wages have not only not increased, but are extremely low. And so what generally happens is that often we see spikes around, for instance, transport or food, etc., in other parts of the world. But what protects the consumer is the ability for consumers to save. And unfortunately, in South Africa, our wages are so low that actually households are unable to save. So when we go through a period such as this, then there is no a base that keeps them afloat. And so what we are hearing is that households are cutting back on the amount of food they eat. They are cutting back on the electricity usage because electricity prices have also gone up. And we are seeing actually hunger increasing in South Africa at the moment.
And this, of course, comes on the back of the trauma and anxiety that so many families face because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's been a really, really, really tough time over the last few years. Before I let you go, Mervyn, you know, we've been giving a lot of coverage to the ANC's policy conference that's just started here in Johannesburg this week. One of the big talking points, even leading up to it, has got to do with more of the politics within the ANC. But one of the things that's supposed to be on the agenda is that the party is supposed to be making proposals for a basic income grant at the conference this weekend. And from the information you're giving us, from the news that your team continues to give us, that really should be the headline coming out of the policy conference. How confident or hopeful are you that you'll hear good news coming out of a conference like this from the ruling party, that we'll finally see ourselves making our way to that basic income grant, even though we know that the amount under discussion is probably far too little to begin with?
Exactly, Marcel, and that is the issue. Now, the president has mentioned it before. The Minister of Finance has come out against the possibility of the basic income grant. So we really are waiting to see how the ANC is going to deal with this question. Because actually, if we do not have a safety net for the majority of South Africans, because let's look at it. I mean, more than about 50% of people of working age are in fact unemployed. So the only way in which we can ensure that the country does not go up in flames in reality is that we find a way in which we not only assist households to afford sufficient food, but we put money into people's pockets so that they can create their own form of livelihood and their own form of work. And that really is what I'm hoping will be part of the ANC discussion. And if we want people to create their own form of work through means of government support, then that basic income grant cannot be at 350. It would have to be at a much higher level.
The story that your numbers tells us, though, is one of crisis. A food security crisis is one of families who are under constant siege of how to continue to put food in the bellies of their children. Something has got to give. What are you hearing at grassroots level about how frustrated and fearful people are of what they need to do to try and get the attention of those in those decision-making positions, to try and do something to make it just a little bit easier for them to feed themselves?
So on the ground, people are absolutely desperate. Absolutely desperate in order just to get food on the table, because most households tell us there is absolutely no belt tightening that they can do. They have no savings because their wages are already so low. So really the only option for them is really to eat less or to go hungry. And we know that there is a direct connection between household food insecurity and social stability. So when household food security increases at the levels it is increasing now, then it is not unrealistic to begin to plan for some form of social instability. And that is the reality that is facing us now. And that is what people are telling us. They really just cannot make do. All they can do is just eat less meals.
Oh, must be such an awful situation for so many of our families to be going through. Thank you for your time this evening, your insight as well. Mervyn Abrahams, Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, joining us there.